Welcome to this night's edition of Puddin'head Press Live. We're on Facebook Live. It is August 24th, 2020. There's a deadly virus outside, and we're in the city of Chicago. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And a little bit later tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Wilda Morris. Wilda Morris is the past president of Poets and Patrons and the past president of the Illinois State Poetry Society. And she has a really condensed, amazing, highly accomplished poetry resume. So, and hey Lydia, how are you? Thanks for watching, everybody. Anyways, we're gonna do that tonight. I got a couple announcements I want to do, and I found something really, really cool on Facebook today that I wanted to share with everybody. I stole it from Jerry Pendergast's Facebook page, and it's seen at Heirloom Books with, I hope it's right here. No, it's not right there. It's from Heirloom Books from the August of last year, and it's a scene of Greg Curry reading at Heirloom Books, and I want to play that for everybody right now. So I got some of my equipment working, and we should have a good rendition of this. Here we go.
I can, because I run this shit, so I'm going to do it. This is called Love Poem to a Friend. It's entitled to a 90-year-old woman that I recently met who has taken an interest in my art, who lives in Evanston. She owned a used bookstore in Chicago for about 30 years with her ex-husband.
And she bought some of your art?
About $4,000 worth.
Good.
And about 50 copies of my book.
Good. All right.
I climb on the taxi or board the train, and in either event, head north and east toward Lake Michigan. I call on arriving and often get no answer. Gamble which door to knock upon. On entering, she wrestles with the door lock, asks if I am hungry, points me to where she keeps the bourbon. There seems to be more of it in the cabinet since we started hanging out, with the sincerity of a mother as well as an old friend. A while later, we sit in the dining room, which, like every other room in the house, is filled to the gills with antiques, art, rare books, and random curiosities. Earlier, I helped find the chicken and spinach, which is cooking now. Sit across from her sipping whiskey, help her get her legs up on the stool, talk. A few days from now, she will turn 90. We discuss literature, human sexuality, relationships and roles, poetry and film, blowjobs, biblical passages. The chicken is good. The spinach came out with just the right amount of garlic. She tries to explain modern art to me, laughs, continues to talk. She calls me and invites me over more than my ex-girlfriend. If only she were 60 years younger. She could be the next situation I fuck up. Let's just consider this a love letter to a like-minded friend who not that long ago was a stranger. It's getting towards midnight now. Realize the last train will be running away soon. I sit on the train with a check in my pocket for several paintings she wanted to purchase. I watched her write it with fragile hands that have weathered family, private business, travel, collection, and in all honesty, probably are stronger than mine will ever be. She was able to hold on to the things she wanted. I look at the check. It's for $50 more than I had asked her for the paintings. I pointed this out. She said she wants me to be comfortable. I held her briefly before leaving. Now on the train, realizing that the only other time not in my parents' home that I was so well looked after, tended to, and called honey was by a waitress at 2 o'clock in the morning with a full ashtray, a scribbled-in notebook, and a cup of coffee, long since having lost track of how many refills I'd ordered in a New Jersey diner. All right, so how we doing? You having fun?
Yeah.
was Mr. Greg Curry. We lost Greg earlier this year. We lost him in the spring before all this virus stuff happened. And that scene was at Chelsea Rectanis's Heirloom Books in Rogers Park, where he had an open mic that he called the Elevator Sessions. And the sad part is we recently lost Chelsea. So we lost some very significant poets that were associated with Heirloom Books and associated with the poetry in Chicago. The big thing about them is in their short time they were with us, in their short time that they were active on the scene, they accomplished a lot. And we published a book by Greg called Gently Broken that you could go to the Puddin'head Press website and get copies of. And Greg was a shock when we lost him. And Chelsea, we lost her just a couple weeks ago. So she was a big loss to the Chicago poetry scene. On Sunday, I was out with a bunch of teenagers, well, a bunch of preteens running around in a boat in Fox Lake. So I missed the really good event we had last Sunday. It was a memorial for Chelsea Rectanis from Heirloom Books. And it was on YouTube. It was on Facebook Live, and it's supposed to be coming up on YouTube. So if you were friends with Chelsea, take a look in the future on YouTube. Or, since you're on Facebook already, you could go to the Heirloom Books Facebook page and see all kind of videos of Chelsea and interviews that had been done with her. And she will hopefully be very well remembered. One of my missions in life is to make sure that fallen poets, like my friend John Dixon back there, get remembered by people. But we're going to have, and Vito Carli is with us. We interviewed Vito Carli last week, and we had a good discussion about the venues he had done. So enough about past poets right now. Grab yourself a drink. It's 2020, so I'm going to have a can of wine tonight. Who would have thought that we actually have cans of wine and stuff? So Sheila Donovan, if you're watching, have a drink with me. And Lynn West is here. She's the host of the poetry readings at the Soupy Cabin that I'll be talking about here in a second. And after I do some announcements, I'm going to bring up Wilda Morris, who has had an amazing poetry career and has been very influential here in poetry in the Chicago area. Anyways, I think that the poetry scene in Chicago is still going pretty strong. The poetry and literary scene in Chicago is still going pretty strong. We had the memorial to Chelsea last Sunday, but last Saturday and Sunday we had a Zoom event at the Yippie Fest by Jeff Helgeson. He's a playwright, but he's been very active on the poetry scene also. Puddin'head published 2 of his poetry plays, and you could look at those on www.puddin'headpress.net or puddin'headpress.com. But he did that play called Zoom Sessions. It was at Yippie Fest, and Lynn West has 2 things she'd like me to highlight. So I think Lynn should put that into the comments on the Facebook feed, and we'll take a look at that when we get a chance. But also, last week there was a historic event went on, I think. El DiGenova had a contributors event for the 40th edition of After Hours magazine. It's his 20th anniversary issue. So I'm pretty proud of the little boy. 20 years. I've been in After Hours, and some of the best poets in the Chicago area have been in After Hours. And he's not only dedicated to showing some of the best that Chicago has, but he also shows some of the best that the nation is. Larry Janowski, Wilda Morris, a lot of great poets. that have been blessed Chicago have been on there. But there's also other stuff going on. Sid Yiddish has a half-hour show called A Quarter Hour with Sid Yiddish, and that's going to be Tuesday. He does it every Tuesday now from 7 to 7:30. And it actually goes, I think, a little bit longer than a half an hour, but it's A Quarter Hour with Sid Yiddish, and Sid Yiddish reads some of his work. Sid Yiddish reads some of other people's works, tells interesting stories, tells some stories from his life, and he's traveled all over the country and all over the world. So keep an eye out for that. That's tomorrow. And Facebook Live, just look for Sid Yiddish is on Facebook Live, and you'll be able to find him. Thursday, James Gaultier is in California right now, but he's an ex-Chicagoan, and he used to have this fantastic performance style. He used to come to Estelle's when I was hosting that during the 90s, and he just had this wild, grab the audience performance style that endeared him to the audience too. But he was this wild man of poetry, and he's still a wild man of poetry, and he's putting on a show on Facebook Live every Thursday, including this Thursday, at 6 p.m. Chicago time. It's a little bit later out in California, but if you're in Chicago, and Chicago is the most important city in the nation, in the world, you know that. And so if you're in Chicago, it's at 6 p.m., so keep an eye out for that. And this weekend, there's two events going on Saturday. There's a organization called the Poets Club of Chicago. And the Poets Club of Chicago had originally sprung from Poets and Patrons. And Poets and Patrons is a Chicago organization. It only costs $15 a year to join Poets and Patrons. It only costs $15 a year to join Illinois State Poetry Society. And you get announcements about poems. You get to some anthologies that you could submit to. They do a thing called Distilled Lives every year, maybe. There's an anthology, ISPS, and again, some of the best Chicago poets have been in there. I've been in there. Wilda Morris has been in there. Jared Smith's been in there. It's Distilled Lives, and it's a Illinois State Poetry Society publication, but you have to join Illinois State Poetry Society to get in there. And once a month, you could publish a poem on the Illinois State Poetry Society website. Plus, they keep your bio there. It's a really good organization to join. But there's an organization allied with Poets and Patrons called the Poets Club of Chicago, and you could join the Poets Club of Chicago. It's an invitation-only event. It's an invitation-only group. So you have to be invited by one of the members, and the members vote on whether you could be in there or not. The thing about the Poets Club of Chicago is they have meetings once a month, I believe. You kind of have to go to the meetings to be a member, and you have to really be a prolific write a lot to be a member of the Poets Club of Chicago. They do critique sessions between one another, and you're expected to contribute to the Poets Club. And two members of the Poets Club, Jared Smith and Wayne Ellen Jones, are going to be putting on a reading for the Poets Club, hosted by Bill Yarrow on Saturday the 29th. So keep an eye out for that. You go on Facebook. You're on Facebook now. Hey, contact Bill Yarrow, Jared Smith, or Wayne Ellen Jones. They're both great poets, and that's going to be on Saturday the 29th at 11:45 in the morning. So contact one of them. They're going to be each do like a 15-minute reading every 2 years. Every 2 years. Okay. Anyways, they're going to also on Saturday. There's going to be a Poets and Patrons workshop from 1 to 4 p.m. Now you got to join Poets and Patrons to be a member of the workshop. The workshop has a judge who critiques the poems, and you submit your poems to the judge beforehand. They read them, they write comments on them, and right now they're having a Zoom session where you get together and you go and you they critique the poems to the judge, and they usually send the poems back to you too. So that's going to be on Saturday the 29th too. And I was at the Cliff Dwellers sometime early last year, and I met a poet named Stephen Gear, and I met a photographer named Stephen Gear, and Stephen does this photography where he photographs shadows and he photographs the city reflected in mud puddles and stuff like that. It's really kind of a unique photography style he has, and he had an idea of going and doing a collaboration between poets and photographers, and have a photographer take a picture based on a poem, and have poets write poetry based on photographers. And a couple weeks later, him and I went to a Poets and Patrons workshop at the Harold Washington Library. That one of the judges at that workshop was Janine Raislut. She was talking about poetry noir, because she had just come out with her Sliders book, and Stephen liked a lot of the poets there, so he asked them to come and do a collaboration with photographers. And they've been working on it for over a year, and they're going to be putting it on Sunday. There's going to be a reading with presentation of poetry, and presentation of the artwork, and that's going to be a Zoom reading. It's called In COVID Times. The poets, it's a group called the P2 Collective. The poets are going to be, they're great poets: Maureen Flannery, Carolyn Johnson, Wilda Morris, Susan Moss. And they're all going to be doing their poetry based on photography. And there's 3 different photographers in this also. You'll probably contact any of them on Facebook, and I'll try to put a link on the Puddin'head Press website to some of these events. So that's coming up this Sunday, August 30th. On the 25th, I don't know what's going on the 25th, and I lost my notes. Oh my God. I feel like Ray Rayner here. Okay, we got that. I think I'll just wind up making stuff up. Okay, there's going to be a reading, a poetry reading next month, the last Saturday of the month, October 24th, 2 p.m. at Arts Center at Highland Park, outside on the porch at the Arts Center. The feature is going to be Mary Beth Bresloff. And I don't know Mary Beth, but the Highland Park Poets are really a really good group, and there's some super talented poets up there. I think there's also going to be a reading on September. Oh, that's going to be on October 24th. Is going to be the reading at the Arts Center in Highland Park. Okay, I should look at my notes a little bit better. Poetry reading next month, last Saturday of month, October 24th at 2 p.m. Arts Center in Highland Park. They're going to be doing it on the porch. That's the infamous second poetry reading in Highland Park that I've been waiting for an announcement for, and I just got one over the poetry feed. See, I got this secret poetry feed that everybody sends me. Everything they're doing in the city of Chicago is kind of cool. But Wilda Morris will reveal more secrets of Chicago poetry when I have her on here in maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most. There's a regular outdoor reading that's been going on up in Highland Park at a place called the Soupy Cabin. I don't think you can go get there to get soup, but I think it's a historic cabin that's been moved into a park in Highland Park, where they do an outdoor reading on the 3rd Saturday of every month right now. So the next one's going to be on the 19th. I believe that's going on. But there's also a little note that somebody just sent me in the feed that the reading is going to be September 26th. So the Soupy Cabin reading has been changed from the 19th to the 26th. So that's going on. Okay, what else is going on? Elizabeth Marino had published a book called Debris by her back in 2011, and she also had a book called Ceremonies that was published in 2010, and she has a new book coming out, and that's going to come out September 15th of this year. It's by Asylum. The book is called Asylum. It's published by Vagabond Press out of California, and Vagabond Press is Vagabond Press's website is vagabondpress.net. So the release for that, the book is going to be released September 15th. I don't know all the details of any kind of reading schedule that Elizabeth's been putting together. I think that's still being put together, but it's Elizabeth Marino's newest book. It's a longer book than Dancing Girls Press had done with ceremonies or Debris that Puddin'head had done back in 2011. It's a longer format book with poetry and stories and commentary and memoirs. And Elizabeth Marino's a great poet, so keep an eye out for that. Also in September, on the 17th, Mike Pewican is having some kind of release reading over online about his book Central Air. This book right here. This is Mike Pewican's new book, Central Air, and these are some notes that I'm trying to hide from the world. Central Air, and he's going to have a release event on September 17th. So I'll get you more details of that as I figure them out. as I go through my emails that people send me. If you have an event going on, send it to me at phbooks@att.net. Kathleen Schandelmeyer is with us. Kathleen Schandelmeyer is she's on hiatus right now, but she's the host of Poetry on the Beach in Rogers Park during the summers here in Chicago. And she's been going on there for 20 years. 20 years plus, I believe. But Kathleen Schandelmeyer, Poetry on the Beach, Rogers Park. Next summer, hopefully, it'll be back. And a friend of ours, a friend of mine, Kathleen's, came out with this. This is called The Happy Taper. And it has a lot of Chicago flavor to it. This issue is called On the Make at the Drake. And it's by Johnny Mazulowitz. And Kathleen Schandelmeyer has a piece in here also, I believe. And Johnny Mazulowitz just came out with Happy Taper number 6. You get Happy Taper number 1 through 5 on the Puddin'head Press website, puddin'headpress.net right now. We don't have number 6 up there, but you can contact Johnny Mazulowitz if you want your own copy of number 6. And you can go to happytaper1@gmail.com. Happy Taper Press has, he sent me some Happy Taper stickers that I'm going to put up somewhere in the city. And also Happy Taper 6 you get at Quimby's right now. So you get at Quimby's in North Avenue in Wicker Park. So, anyways, and Kathleen Schandelmeyer does have something in here, and I can't find it right now, and one day I'll have Kathleen read it to you. The Happy Taper Press, it's only $3. So contact Johnny or send email to phbooks@att.net, and I'll let you know how to get a copy of Happy Taper number 6. In fact, he talks about like when Jim Belushi had sex in his room there or something. Anyways, that's Happy Taper number 6. Johnny is an ex-Chicagoan who's down in Chicago, down in Florida, down in northern Florida, and he still acts like a Chicagoan. Johnny, good job with Happy Taper. I read a couple of your stories, and this is to the Happy Taper. It's a brand new baby book. Those are just about all the announcements I could think of right now. If somebody wants to send me an announcement in the feed, I will let people know about it. Like I said, Chelsea Karaktanis, there's a memorial that's gonna be for her on YouTube. And Jeff Helgeson's play Zoom Sessions is supposed to be up on YouTube pretty soon too, if it's not up there already. I haven't checked. I haven't had time to check. I was out taking preteens around a boat on Fox Lake this weekend, which I, would rather do that than work on your poetry stuff. I'm sorry. Anyways, I got my can of wine here, and I think it's about time to call a poet. I only have one guest tonight, and that guest is Wilda Morris. Wilda Morris is a well-known Chicago poet, and she's a real sweetheart. I remember the last time I did a reading with her was at Brood Awakening in Westmont, and I think it was Jeff and I did a reading there, and I told a horror story. Actually, a story about Halloween. So it wasn't really a horror story. And yes, Lynn West, I was there, and I told the day Fat Boy played pool. So that was what I did last time I was featured by Wilda Morris at Brood Awakening. Wilda Morris is the author of this book, and she's the author of this book. And yes, there is a computer going on over there, and you could see the reflection in the book. So I have to do something about that at the next reading. So what I want to do right now, with no further ado, is I'm going to call a poet. And I'm going to do more work on the Puddin'head website soon, so don't worry about it. I'll get to it. Is this Wilda Morris? Hi, this is Dave Gecic from the Puddin'head Press. I'd like to put you on to our live poetry reading, our live poetry show. Okay, I'm going to put you on speakerphone and put you in front of the camera. It's as simple as that. Hey, Wilda, are you with us?
I'm here.
I'm here too, and I hope the audience is here. We got a couple people watching us right now, and Lynn West is watching us. Kathleen Chanelmeyer is watching us. I can't tell. All the people are watching us. Hopefully Lydia Gomez is still with us. So, and there's all kind of little corners. Vito Carly is with us also. So say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And Wilda, like I said, is the author of 2 books, and she's been very involved in the poetry scene. I thought that Wilda had been a poet since. I thought that Wilda had been a poet here in Chicago since before John Dixon. But no, we were both friends with John Dixon, and he's a dearly departed poet friend of mine. But Wilda, you are not from Chicago. Where are you from, actually?
I grew up in Iowa City, Iowa.
Were you in the city itself, or were you out in the country, farm girl?
I wanted to be a farm girl, but I was a city girl.
Okay.
I wanted a horse.
Okay? So you didn't have a horse?
No.
I'm sorry. We'll see what we could do about that in the future.
Well, thank you. I think Iowa City was a great place to grow up, though. If I'd been out in the country, I don't know, maybe I never would have gone to college, and who knows what life would have been like. But
Do you remember a bookstore called Prairie Lights in Iowa City?
I believe it's still there. It's one of the best bookstores I've ever been in.
I believe it's still there too. It's I remember I set Effie Mahopoulos up for a reading there. I think it was like 1989 or something like that. Quite a while ago. But yeah, I think it's still there. They're a little bit less small press friendly than they used to be. I haven't been out there for over 5 years. But last time I was out there, they were still there.
The good thing I haven't been there lately, because when I go in there, I spend too much money.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember another bookstore called River Lights?
Iowa City?
I think it's in Dubuque.
No, I haven't seen that one.
But there was a second bookstore in Iowa City too that would occasionally carry people's poetry books. I can't remember what the name of it though. But that was years ago. That bookstore has been closed for 20 years possibly.
Okay.
So you grew up in Iowa City?
I did, but I went to college at American University, Washington, D.C.
Wow.
I wanted to study political science.
That must have been considerably different than Iowa City. Who was president when you were there?
Well, actually, one of the great things that happened when I was there was that John F. Kennedy was campaigning, and he came on campus and spoke. And then one of the Kennedy-Nixon debates was at the TV station, which was very close to the school. So a bunch of us walked over to the TV station. I could have touched Kennedy's and Nixon's cars as they drove in for that debate. You wouldn't be allowed that close anymore, but that's one of my wonderful memories from my college years.
Mm-hmm. That was the first televised presidential debate there ever was.
I got to attend Kennedy's inauguration. I got a ticket from my congressman from Iowa City.
Wow.
The first election I voted in.
Uh-huh.
And I went, we had to get a notary, I think, on our ballots. And I went with I was voting for Kennedy, and I went with a friend who was voting for Nixon. But we went together to vote, first vote.
But that must have been must have been an exciting time, and it probably really formed you at that time.
It was pretty exciting.
So
at that time, you could get in line for a tour of the White House without getting tickets, and you could wander the halls of Congress and enjoy the art on the walls. And I liked the Library of Congress a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Did a lot of my research for term papers.
A friend of mine, Larry Goldberg, was out there at that time too. He was one of the secretaries at one of the offices and met Kennedy through there. But
Okay.
but so you got your bachelor's at National University?
At American University.
American University.
And then I went to the University of Illinois for grad school.
Okay. So
I met my husband.
wow.
We actually met in D.C. before we went, but that's where we recorded, was Champaign-Urbana.
So you went to Champaign-Urbana. You got your bachelor's in political science.
Well, actually, yeah, my bachelor's was in American government. My PhD was in political science.
Okay. Okay. Wow, Dr. Morris. But you guys went to Champaign together.
Well, we went at the same time. We weren't together when we went there.
Okay.
Us met very briefly on the steps of a church in D.C. and were introduced by somebody, so I recognized him in Champaign.
So after you graduated, did you move to the Chicago area?
No. We moved, well, we lived for quite a while in South Bend, Indiana. My husband was on the faculty at Notre Dame. The reason I was pausing was between getting my master's and PhD, we actually lived in the D.C. area again in College Park.
Okay.
Came back and finished our degrees.
So
Degree, but then we lived in. My husband taught at Notre Dame, and we decided whoever got the best job first, that's where we go. So it was easier for him. He's a nuclear engineer.
okay, that's right.
So he got a job there, and then he came. We've been here more than 40 years. He came to Argonne National Lab to work. So that's why we moved to the Chicago area.
Okay. Did you work as a teacher or any jobs here in Chicago?
Well, I went to seminary at Northern Baptist Seminary, and I was on their faculty for a number of years after that.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching mostly religious education.
Mm-hmm.
I taught a course on women in the Hebrew Scripture. Enjoyed teaching in other things that weren't exactly in my field.
Well,
I did teach one course at Garrett in Evanston, later.
Okay. Well, you're political science, theology, and where does the poetry come in?
Well, I think it started with my grandmother and my mother. My grandmother memorized a lot of poetry, and she recited a lot of it to us, developed a love of poetry. And I went to Longfellow School in Iowa City, my elementary school. So my first poetic love was Longfellow. And my mother didn't recite as much. She did recite some by heart, but she also read a lot of poetry to my sister and I.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked writing poetry. I did when I was a teenager. Wrote quite a bit. But when I went to college, I was so obsessed with political science, excuse me, that I didn't take any English courses. I didn't write poetry while I was in D.C. Didn't write poetry again until 1963 or 64, after I was married.
I went to Loyola. I'm not sure we even had a poetry class.
I'm sure they had English class, creative writing at AU, but I didn't take any of those.
I took one creative writing course and I dropped it because I had too many other courses that I had to concentrate on. But you know, it was difficult to actually get to learn about poetry at that time, at Loyola at least, and I don't know, like I don't think I was formed by academia for poetry writing at all. I don't think that was a skill I learned in school. Where do you think?
That's true with me too. I wasn't formed by academia as far as poetry is concerned.
Now you spent a lot of time in the Midwest. Your grandmother was really. I've noticed a lot of people had one individual that gave them a love of poetry. When did your love of poetry and your poetic life really start to grow and flourish? Was it through magazines, or were you you weren't doing a lot of public readings? Were you writing and putting poetry into your closet? What inspired you when you first became a poet to start writing?
Well, I guess I've written a little bit off and on, but in the 1990s I got more involved. 1992, our oldest granddaughter died, and I looked at poetry as one place to deal with my feelings. It was probably already writing some poetry, and then a couple years after, after that, I was invited to go to Green Lake Conference Center as a volunteer.
Green Lake, Wisconsin.
And
right?
I started attending the writers' conferences at Green Lake.
Green Lake, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay.
The first year I went, I didn't have enough confidence to go to the poetry section of the writing conference. So I went to one on writing devotionals. And then, but I met with Robin Chapman at the end of the week. She taught the poetry. And I took a couple poems I'd written. And she said, come back next year and attend the poetry workshop. So I started attending the poetry section. And I got to study with Ellen Court, who was the first poet laureate of Wisconsin. Robin Chapman wasn't back at Green Lake, but I've been able to study with her since then at the Clearing, Moore County, Wisconsin. So she's been important in my poetry life.
I heard the Clearing is a great place to go to.
It is a super great place.
Do you know how often?
I really like Robin's. It's called Poetry Camp. And I go anytime I can. And it's usually the most productive week of the year for my writing because of the way she structures it.
Did you go this year?
It was canceled because of the pandemic, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
So you started writing poetry in order to deal with the loss.
Well, that was at least part of why I got writing a lot of poetry.
Mm-hmm. Is there a purpose that people should have to write poetry, and especially now, especially today, and today in August America, is there a reason? Is there a thing that poets are supposed to be doing now? Is there a need for poets right now, and is there a purpose that poets should serve or do serve in the country right now?
I wouldn't say that there's just one purpose, but I think in a time that we're in now, that a lot of people turn to poetry for comfort, but there's also a need for poets who will write about social issues that need our attention, and there are just a lot of different reasons.
See, I've talked to some people about this question, and some people, think that it's a little bit of a poet's job for distraction. And they're like, well, Dave, go out there and do your kids' poetry because the world needs entertainment and the world needs distraction from it.
Well, I think that's maybe a legitimate reason for writing and doing readings also. I just started reading an article in the Poets and Writers, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it was talk. I think it's going in the direction of needing to speak up on important issues.
Well, you didn't start writing to a great deal, and didn't start publishing until after you had the workshops at Green Lake, Wisconsin.
I had published a few poems in my marriage before. We adopted 5 children.
5? Wow.
Over a period of 9 months. 2 sisters and then 2 sisters with a brother.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't get much writing done after I had 5 children. I was in over my head, sort of. But I published a few poems before that, so.
Do you remember where you got published? Were they college magazines?
I got published in a live, I think it's called Alive Now,
Mm-hmm.
which is published by the Upper Room, some poems that early in my marriage.
Were they out of? I think they were out of Minneapolis.
I think they're out of Nashville.
Nashville. Okay. I got a wall on the other side of the room, probably with 1,000 poetry magazines. I think I got a copy there somewhere of it, and I'll look to see if I have a Wilda Morris poem in there. But you also got heavily involved in Poets and Patrons and the Illinois State Poetry Society.
Yes. Well, actually, because I went to these poetry workshops in Green Lake, some friends invited me, said I should join the Wisconsin Fellowship of Poets.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote to them to inquire about joining, and they said, well, we could accept your membership. However, I think you should investigate the Illinois State Poetry Society. And I'd never even heard of it. But they put me in touch with it. And I found out at that time there was only one chapter, and it was meeting in Lamont, which is very close to where I live in Bolingbrook.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked out very well. And actually, when I became president of Illinois State Poetry Society, I said that my one goal was that to learn how to start new chapters, because there's just one chapter meeting in Lamont. We hadn't earned the name of Illinois State Poetry Society.
Yes, okay, I could see the point.
I did work hard on that, and then while Susan Moss has been president, she's worked also at starting new chapters.
I know
we have a number of chapters.
There's a chapter on the north side of Chicago,
There's one in Northbrook.
Okay.
There's one in the Carbondale area. There's one in Champaign-Urbana.
There's one out west too somewhere, I think.
There's several others.
Okay. But I mean, I love the Illinois State Poetry Society. I keep on lapsing my membership in it. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is Wilda Morris, who I'm interviewing right now. Wilda Morris is the ex-president of Poets and Patrons and Illinois State Poetry Society. She has 2 books, and we're going to talk about her 2 books in a second. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you want to come back later, this is going to be on Facebook for quite a while, and eventually it'll be up on the Puddin'head YouTube channel. But this is Wilda Morris. We're talking about Illinois State Poetry Society. We're talking about her poetic life, and we're going to be having her read some poetry in a little while. And we just had Robert Kotek from Florida is watching us. Thanks for watching, Bob. But anyways, Wilda, so you expanded the Illinois State Poetry Society. I love the way that the Fellowship of Wisconsin Poets are very, very active. They're very, very supportive of one another. And they do some great, they used to put on some great events up there, all up and down from Milwaukee from Madison all the way up to Green Bay. And I've met a lot of good poets out of them. But you joined the Illinois State Poetry Society and expanded the Illinois State Poetry Society. And now Poets and Patrons has been around for a long, long time. Is that correct?
Yes, I learned about Poets and Patrons through the Illinois State Poetry Society. And one thing I like is the 2 organizations work together, but they're very different in how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
So the Poets and Patrons primarily has workshops, and they have somebody who's a very well-published poet, maybe a professor who teaches poetry, sometimes 2 people leading the workshop, and you submit your poems in advance, and they're critiqued at the meeting, and helps you learn about it. The Illinois State Poetry Society, when you go to the chapter, you take multiple copies of your poem, or a couple of poems, and they're critiqued by the group as a whole. So it's not a workshop, it's a critique meeting generally.
Mm-hmm.
But both of them have sponsored readings. And actually, I think the first readings I ever did were sponsored by Illinois State Poetry Society.
Oh, okay. And I like Illinois State Poetry Society because they also have the website stuff that they do.
Yes, every other month you can post one of your poems.
Oh, it's every other month, okay.
If it's published online, it's considered published.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us select poems that have already been published, like in a print journal, then you can put it online and more people can read it.
Mm-hmm. No, I really.
That's what I usually do.
I really like the online stuff that they do, and I think there's a poetry bio section. That's a great poetry bio section for the members.
You can also, if you're a member of Poets and Patrons, you can also have some of your poems put on their website.
And both of them are only $15 a month, so it's even.
I think they're 20 now.
Oh, I think they're 20. Oh my God.
Inflation, you know.
Yeah, I know, and they were $15. They were $15 a month for so long too. And they're both great organizations. Now you, the first time I saw your work in print was this book that I'm showing the audience here. Okay, Szechuan Shrimp and Fortune Cookies. And it's by Wilda Morris, and this was published in, hold on a second, 2008 is when this book came out. Was this book totally written in a Chinese restaurant?
Well, not totally, but probably close to 90%.
So it seriously was 90% written while you were eating Chinese food?
At the Chinese China chef in Westmont. At that time, I was coordinator for Shalom Education, which is an ecumenical organization that published curriculum materials on peace and justice issues. And I was working, it was 20 hours a week, so I'd work in the morning, then I'd go have lunch at the China chef, and try to write a poem before I left.
So,
I think the only times that I didn't get a draft, not always a good draft, but something drafted, was when I had to leave fairly soon to pick up a grandchild I was watching in the afternoon or something. But I did most of my writing, most of this book was written there. I confess there's at least one poem that was written at a different restaurant, but I used poetic license by putting it into Chinese.
are we allowed to do that? So what town was this restaurant in?
It's in Westmont
It's in Westmont. Okay.
on Cass Avenue.
And you still live in Bolingbrook, and Bolingbrook is not that far from Westmont.
It's not that far.
Now you do a poetry reading in Westmont at Brood Awakening.
Yes, when I was working in Westmont, my office was in the Methodist Church. And Ron Green, who was a pastor there, was very interested in all sorts of culture, including poetry. And together we worked out, I think it was originally his idea that we do we did one at the library, but he mentioned that this coffee shop on Quincy, right across from the train station, and he thought they might like us to do readings there. And there was another a chain coffee place threatening to come in,
Really?
walk or the train station or something. So we decided we wanted to support Brood Awakening. So we started this reading, and it was the last Sunday of the month in the afternoon. And we did it for years until we got shut down by the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great coffee house to have a reading at, and you go there, and there is a cover fee for it, but for the cover fee you get a bagel or some kind of cookies.
Muffins, they specialize in muffins.
Muffins.
But you could get a banana or cookie or something instead if you something other than a muffin if you preferred, and coffee.
My sister was banned from there.
Your sister was banned?
Yeah. She was having a party, and she went to Brood Awakening to get pastries for her party. And she starts saying, I want that, I want that, I want that. And she says, and they said, okay, well, that's all you could have. And she's like, well, why? And it's like, well, we need to save the pastries and stuff for the rest of the customers. And my sister threw a fit. And they told her, get out and never come back.
Well, she could probably go back now and buy a couple pastries. They'd let her in, I think.
Yeah, it was literally many years ago. It was probably 15 years ago or something. I don't even know if Tom or Tim runs that.
Now it's Craig and Sylvia.
Carl, yeah, I know his his cousin from Rockford. He was the art director of the planetarium. But yeah, it's a great place to have a reading at. And I miss it, and hopefully we'll be back one of these days. Do you plan on starting it back up if things calm down and they reopen?
Well, they're open now, and Craig would like us to start, but I'm still quarantining.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite the time to do a lot of indoor readings. Let's put it that way.
I'm in the age category.
No, I'm getting to be in the age category too. But you're in great shape, and you're an absolute sweetheart. I want to talk about your newest book, the Pequod poems.
Okay.
This is a really unique book. And this is Wilda Morris, who I'm interviewing. She's the author of the Pequod poems, and she's author of Siscon Swimp and Fortune Cookies, and this is a book of poetry, and all the poems are based on or told from the viewpoint of a different character from the book Moby Dick. It's a really cool concept, and she captures the spirit of a lot of the characters in here. But you also had some structural stuff you did with Pequod poems too. It's not just every poem is a different character. Every poem is structurally different than the other ones.
Well, it's not exactly correct that every poem is from a different character, but some of them are from the point of view of particular characters. Some of them are responses to quotations from Moby Dick. Since I didn't take any literature in college, I decided a few years ago I needed to fill in some gaps in my education, so I started actually getting recordings of classical novels from the library and listening to them while I was driving around, particularly if I was driving to Wisconsin or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I listened to Moby Dick, and I was really taken by Melville's language. And I've listened to Moby Dick on tape or CD at least 4 times altogether. But I took a course at the Newberry Library on Moby Dick. So I actually read it. Not just listened to it, but actually read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is such a contemporary book. It was way ahead of his time. He said he'd written an evil book. And a lot of people thought that was true, so they didn't think they should read it.
What wasn't the English title of it, The Big Fish or something like that?
I think it was The Whale.
The whale. Okay.
The white whale. So it actually flopped commercially when it was published. It was not well received.
So you just fell in love with Moby Dick, and that's why you chose it as the book you were going to base this book on.
Yes, as I listened to it, I kept hearing these lines that I thought would make good epigrams or epigraphs for poems, and these characters that were interesting. So some of the poems are backstories about the character, filling in the blanks. Some of them have to do with the aftermath of the story,
but
what happened afterwards.
You use a different form for a whole bunch of these poems too, don't you?
Yes. Well, one example is I wrote a letter from Mary Starbuck to her husband. Starbuck was the first mate, and he's the namesake of Starbucks coffee shop, actually. Mm-hmm. And I wrote it as an ABCDarian poem, and then I wanted to write a letter to Ahab from his wife, and I started out using the same form, and I realized it wasn't working, partly because the marriage that the Starbucks had and a marriage with Ahab were two very different marriages, and she had to be a different person, so I needed a different form to write it in. But actually, Moby Dick, the book is written in a lot of different forms. There's just plain prose. Some of the chapters are set up like dramas.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are kind of Shakespearean in their Shakespearean-type monologues and so on. So I thought it was appropriate to use a variety of forms in responding to Moby Dick.
I've heard you got a great you got a great response from this book too, from the critics and from, especially from the Melville fans.
Well, one of probably the highlight of my career as a poet was that I got an invitation to read from this book at Arrowhead, which is the estate where Melville wrote Moby Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of the celebration of Melville's 100th anniversary. And then I also got a reading in the same trip on Nantucket.
We got a comment from Vito Carli, and I think he's getting ready to make a whole bunch of whale puns, and I really hope that he doesn't.
I'm going to spout off about whales.
Yeah, yep. And it spout off about, oh God, I didn't even catch the pun. I need a nap or something like that. Can you read us some poetry? I mean, when I announced that you were going to be on tonight, there was a whole bunch of people that talked about they love your poetry and they wanted to hear you read.
Okay. I can read a couple from this book. Maybe one that I'll read is one of the most unusual ones in the book. And I think Caroline Johnson told me it was her favorite. And it's a lipogram, and it's a name lipogram. So the whole poem can only use the letters that are in Herman Melville's name. And the fact that he didn't have a middle name meant that I didn't have very many letters to work with.
Uh-huh.
So this poem is called Herman Melville Explains Himself. It's a little bit abstract, but I think it really does kind of say something about Melville. The poem says, Herman Melville explains himself. I am air, I am rain, I am hail, I am a hammer and a nail. I mine evil, I am raven, I am eel, I am lava, I am larva, I veil, and I reveal. So that was a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Another one that's a little bit more standard kind of poetry is called Tools, and it has a quote at the top from chapter 46. To accomplish his object, Ahab must use tools, and of all tools used in the shadow of the moon, men are the most apt to get out of order. And before I read the poem, I might say that there's a lot of philosophy. Right. Tools is on 105. Yeah, that's the lithograph. There's a lot of philosophy. There's a lot of wrestling with theology and sociology in Moby Dick. So this is Tools. Here is an important truth. I am a tool or potential tool of someone, a ship captain, politician, CEO, the neighborhood bully, my boss. I can be played like a violin or a kettle drum. I can be the screwdriver turning someone else's screw, the hammer pounding someone else's nail. It takes courage to refuse the task, resign the commission, miss the promotion because of protest. Too easy to be a sailor buying into the vengeance of Ahab. Too easy even to be the first mate, knowing right from wrong, and the risk of the whole crew, resisting only cautiously now and then, afraid to stand unmoving and take the consequences. Sometimes there are only two options: to go along with evil or to get out of order.
I don't know if I'm supposed to clap or not when I don't know if I'm supposed to clap or not when I'm the host and we're online. Or should I just say? I think I'm supposed to comment. I'm supposed to say, that was wonderful.
You want me to read my attempt at humor? It's not in that book. It's in Encore.
Okay. No, I seen you at the at the coffee house do all kind of humorous poetry and humorous stuff. I remember you dressed in a witch's costume, parading around the coffee house, the Brood Awakening.
I think I did wear a witch's hat one
Yep.
year.
And
Well, this poem won third place in the National Federation of State Poetry Society contest in 2020. It's called Dust Bunnies. I'm going to get a drink of water first.
okay, I'll have a glass of wine. I'll have a drink of wine while you're getting a glass of water. This is Wilda Morris. She's the author of the Pequot poems, and she's the author of Szechuan Shrimp and Fortune Cookies. I believe this book is out of print now. So this is one of the rare books that are in the Puddin'head archives, and Pequot
poems you can buy from Amazon or from Kelsey Books.
And you could also, Kelsey Books is the publisher, and you could. I also think that you could walk into any Barnes and Noble bookstore and order a copy of this, because I think it's going through small press distribution too. So.
I'm not sure whether there are any more copies of that, because when it was published, Rockford Writers Guild Press was not connected with Facebook. It wasn't print on demand. I have a few copies left.
Okay. Oh, well, they need to go into another printing then.
I think that the text of it is on the computer that just crashed.
Okay. Well, no, the publisher has it. The publisher could switch it over to a print on demand thing. That's not a difficult thing to do.
It's possible.
I've done that with the second printing in a couple books. I didn't do a print on demand, but I did a cheaper printing actually, with cheaper binding, so it'd be more affordable. And I've been thinking about taking a couple books and putting them on as ebooks, but it's so hard to format a poetry book properly for an ebook, because most Kindles and stuff like that want to reformat the pages.
Okay.
So I mean,
Okay, I have dust bunnies.
Give us dust bunnies.
Who taught dust bunnies to hide under my bed? What makes them think it's a wonderful spot? They slink into darkness and quietly hide behind the dropped books and the shoes I forgot. It's not their intent to cause me great harm. They just want to gather and have their own fun. They hide from the broom and the vacuum and hope I'll leave for the day and go out for a run. While they are caged, so to speak, in my room, their only desire is to be left alone, to do or not do their very own thing. But I've got a dust map. Their plans are blown. I gather them up with a vigorous stroke into the dustpan, and then in a flash, without pity for those cute little guys, I tip the dustpan, toss them all in the trash. I sometimes wonder if I had been cruel, and with no dog or cat, I have some regrets. For the dust bunnies hiding under my bed were my only companions, my only pets.
I mean, I think we all have the cleanest houses we've ever had because we've been spending so much time at home. I actually do my dishes now sometimes. And anything coming up for Wilda Morris?
Well, I'm part of the reading in COVID times.
In COVID time, you're working with Steve Gear.
Yes.
How did that finally work out? Are you doing a poem based on a photograph, or does somebody do a photograph based on your poem?
Well, it goes both ways. It's kind of a conversation. We submit poems. We started out, we didn't have a theme at the beginning, but it turned into a COVID reading. So we had planned to do a gallery exhibit with the poems and the photographs, but of course all the galleries got shut down.
I remember you guys were meeting pretty regularly, and I guess that the meeting stopped.
Well, we're meeting on Zoom these days.
Mm-hmm. The original concept was to do a poem and then somebody does a photo based on the poem, and then somebody does a poem based on the photo, and then photo. So I mean, it's like it would be a chain of
That was my
stuff.
understanding at the beginning, but that isn't the way Steve presented it. It's a little bit looser. So there could be more than one poem on the same photograph, more than one photograph responding to the same poem. Could be a set of related poems and photographs.
I'll get a link on the Puddin'head Press Facebook page in the next couple days on where you can go for it.
If somebody wants to attend, they have to contact me or Caroline or somebody in the collective, because there's been so much Zoom bombing.
Yeah.
That we're not putting the link on. There is a Facebook page that Caroline set up about it, but we're not
And it's
putting
called
the link directly on Facebook.
it's called In COVID Times. There's a event listing for it and on Facebook.
Right.
And it's going to be it's Maureen Flannery, Wilda Morris, Carolyn Johnson, and Susan Moss.
And there's going to be a program where photographs are projected while the poems are read, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end for people who want to ask questions.
Okay.
Some of what poetry that's in it are excerpts out of poems. Like one of the poems I sent was called "If Doom Is Your Thing." It was an erasure poem from, you might remember, the Chicago Tribune, before everything shut down, was doing a weekly segment called Around the Town or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through an issue of that, and I just took out phrases to put together as a poem. And that poem was kind of negative kind of thing. But Steve took out some lines of that and some lines that other people wrote, other poems. But then there's some whole poems that each of us has written.
Did you used to run workshops for ISPS or for Poets and Patrons? Did you do
I have done workshops for Poets and Patrons and ISPS. And for a number of years, I led poetry workshops at the Green Lake Conference Center while they had a writers' conference.
And somebody just reminded me of something on the Facebook feed. Wilda Morris's Poetry Challenge. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I've been doing this for a long time. It started out actually at the poetry camp at the clearing. One year we all went to they didn't have internet connection there, but we went to a nearby pub and were taught how to start a blog. So I didn't want to do a blog where I had to post something every day or two.
Mm-hmm.
But I came up with the idea of doing a contest every month. And on the first of the month, I post a poetry challenge. And then other poets have until the 15th to submit a poem that responds to the challenge. This month it was praise poems. And it could be, it could be religious praise poems, but it also could be praising your mother or, other kinds of praise poems. And it's too late to submit this month. The winner's already been selected, but it hasn't been announced yet. But on the 1st of August, there should be a new challenge, and I'd love to hear some more Chicago area poets.
How many submissions do you get for it?
It depends a lot month to month, and it's partly a matter of what the challenge is. If it's a forum, I don't get so many. If it's a theme that people really respond to, then I get quite a few. And it depends on how much time I have to advertise it.
Okay.
You can identify with that.
Yeah. I've been so busy that it's an insane world.
The picture that is in the chat shows a woman from India and her daughter, and the daughter was actually the one that won the challenge last month.
Wow. It's
So
international.
it's kind of cool to get readers and submitters from different places around the world, as well as from the U.S.
Well, I'm gonna kick you off the phone. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you.
Any last words or wisdom for like a beginning poet? What would you tell a poet who's just starting out?
I think it's important to read poetry regularly, like every day. And when you find poets that you really like, then read more of their work. But I think it's also good to try out different forms. For one thing, if you just write free verse, it's easy to end up rewriting the same poem in different ways. But if you're writing in a form where you're forced to have a certain number of syllables, or you're forced to do a rhyme, some kind of rhyme or something, it pushes you to think of things that you might not have thought to write. So it can even make your free verse more creative because you've done those exercises. You were forced into thinking of things differently.
Okay, well, I don't know if you could hear this beep that's going on right now too, but I'm starting to run out of juice on my cell phone. I think I need a new cell phone.
Okay.
I think I need
well,
a
thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking with
new
you.
speakerphone. And I'll talk to you soon. And thank you. You're wonderful. And this I think was a great interview. And I found out all kind of stuff I didn't know about Wilda Morris.
Okay.
And
thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye. That was our interview with Wilda Morris. She's the author of the Pequod poems. That's still currently available. I think it's published by Kelsey Books, and this book was from 2019. It was from last year. I remember Wilda was doing readings all over the place. And I think Wilda did a reading at the Gallery Cabaret for it. Szechuan shrimp and fortune cookies. That's not available right now, and Wilda has like a couple copies left at home, and they cost like $1 billion because she wants to save a couple copies, and this is in the Puddin'head archives. So hopefully one of these days, hopefully one of these days when I die, it's going to wind up in a library somewhere. Did I just say that? Anyways, I do have a vast collection of poetry flyers and stuff like that I'm gonna hopefully wind up one of these days. The next Monday is the 31st. I think I'm gonna have a show. Don't know what I'm gonna do yet. And if I could get a hold of a certain number of people, certain people, I'm going to put on the screen a reading that Lawrence Tyler and I did in like 1989, VHS tape of it that I have. So I'm going to start trying to play like a media kind of thing. And you saw the little screen that I had when I had my iPad running, and I want to listen to it later and see if it actually worked okay. But I got my sound back up and running on my iPad, so I might be doing some video links with people down the road in the future and bring that back a little bit. And I think the lighting turned out really well on this tonight. I think that maybe it's the color of my face, or maybe it's my natural beauty. I don't know. We still got some people watching online. Anybody online has some announcements or anything they want to say to our audience? Lynn West did tell me about a couple readings she had coming up. She has a reading coming up at the Stoopy Cabin on the 19th, I believe, of next month. And then there's going to be a reading at the Highland Park, in Highland Park the month after that in October. We have Johnny Mazurowic's Happy Taper. Get your copy of Happy Taper. And if you want some older copies of Johnny Mazurowic's Happy Taper, like number 1 through 5, go to the Puddin'head Press website. And Central Air by Mike Pewican is a new book. He's going to have a reading for that next month. And what else do I have here? I got Happy Taper stickers that I'm supposed to put up all over the city. Thank you for everybody for watching. I think Liz Marino's book's coming out next month. So Asylum, and Liz Marino's book was the book Debris that Puddin'head did was originally put out by Moon Journal Press. Moon Journal Press did some really nice publications, but Moon Journal Press would do a certain run and would never do a second printing. And when I saw Debris, I thought, wow, this is a really good book by Liz Marino. And we still have some copies available on the Puddin'head website, www.puddin'headpress.net or puddin'headpress.com. But we still have copies of Debris available, or there's a Debris Facebook page, and that links to a buy link that you get a copy of Debris by Elizabeth Marino. But when I saw that book, I thought that it was an amazing book, and I also thought that the artwork didn't live up to its potential. So I republished the Moon Journal Press as Debris, a Puddin'head Press publication. And I'm glad I did, because it's been a really successful book for both Puddin'head and Liz. It's opened all kind of doors for both of us too. So take a look at it. If you want to, take a look at Debris on the Puddin'head Press website. Anyways, there's also Wilda Morris. Bill Savage will be teaching a class on Chicago poetry at the Newberry Library. Let me look at an announcement I can make for people really quick. Chicago poetry, blah, blah, blah. Bill Savage. I haven't seen Bill Savage since he was doing stuff for, poetry, Chicago Poetry International Post-Industrial, led by Bill Savage. There's 7 sessions from 6 to 7:30. Thursday, September 24th, and every Thursday until November 5th. It's going to be a virtual Zoom workshop that Bill Savage is going to do, and there's a charge for it. So take a look at the Newberry Library site. There's all kind of information on there, and it's by Bill Savage. Now, Bill Savage, don't tell Bill Savage, but he was probably, I think he influenced me as a poet. Because Bill Savage and I went to Loyola together, and I was a senator in the dorm government, and Bill Savage was the security guard at our dorm, and I used to walk back and forth, and I realized that he was in Cadence magazine, which is sitting up there. I should just do a magazine show one of these days. Cadence magazine, which was the literary magazine at Loyola University, and Bill Savage, the security guard in my dorm room, was in this magazine all the time. And I said, wow, I got a couple things that are like poetry, and I should put them in the magazine. And then Bill Savage had a fit, so he pulled all his poetry out of Cadence one year, and that was the year I decided, well, if Bill Savage isn't going to be published in there, I'm not going to be published in there. So I guess I wasn't published because of Bill Savage. Anyways, Bill Savage is a nice guy, and there's a poetry workshop that he's doing. So over the years, you kind of find all these little connections you have with other Chicago poets. Lair Scott is taking a look at us. Lair Scott is in Cincinnati, I believe, right now. And Lair Scott did some great readings in Chicago, and we miss him, and we miss him on the scene too. But like I said, we don't have many readings in Chicago right now, but there is the one live reading up at the Stoopy Cabin, and we got a good online presence for Chicago poetry, and I think we need to keep it up. And more Facebook Live, more things like Sid Yiddish's show that he's doing tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Sid Yiddish's half-hour show called Sid Yiddish's Quarter Hour. But we need more shows like that. So Wednesday's open. Somebody do a Wednesday poetry show on Facebook Live. Thanks a lot for listening. And I'm going to go finish my can of wine that doesn't hold as much as a bottle. And and eat a whole bunch of fruit because that's what I've been doing lately. I lost a lot of weight this year, and I've been having fun with nephews and nieces and kids, and Annette's on the line. Annette just joined us, and Annette just got a new dog. It's a cute new dog, and let's see what else is going on in Chicago Poetry. If you got anything going on in Chicago Poetry, email it to me at phbooks@att.net so I could tell people about it. I'm no longer doing my Puddin'head newsletter. It's a lot less work to just tell you guys about it online on Monday night. And I'll see you next Monday night, August 31st at 7 p.m. I'll have some kind of guests, and I think I'm going to do a magazine show. Maybe I'll get some magazine guests. Thanks a lot for listening, and everybody have a nice night.